The Joy of Motherhood by Buchi Emecheta. Chapter 8. The Rich and the Poor. It was a wet day in July, 1939. How heavy the rain was that day! It seemed as if all the taps in the sky had been turned on by the hand of whoever makes the weather. In no time the compound belonging to Dr. Mears, the streets, the whole neighborhood, became a mass of miniature rivulets. One could hardly believe that only a few hours before this same area had been completely dry land. Water poured from the sky, dimming the sun that was struggling to come out until the earth could absorb no more, and people thought the earth itself was oozing water as well. Most of the trees in the compound, after hours of bowing and rising to the force of the howling wind, lost their branches. Meanwhile, it continued to rain. Naif did not like such weather. There would be no place for him to dry his washing, and he knew the madam would be displeased. In the illogical way of women, she would thump into the ironing room blaming him, talking in that strangling voice of hers, as if he, Naif, had sent the rain. He quickly squeezed out as much water as he could from the washing by hand, and filled the iron with coal. At least he was going to see to it that his employers had something dry to wear, even if there was no sun to bleach the clothes white. He settled his mind to this occupation, telling himself that he was going to spend the rest of the day in this way. The rain could go on pouring until it became like the flood in the Bible, but right here he was going to keep his corner dry. He could hear the shuffling feet of the madam. She was still in her house shoes, and had not changed into her walking shoes that clipped all over the place, Naif noted mentally. He quickly stopped whistling. She did not come straight to him. She went to the kitchen first, and talked to her cook and her small boy there. Naif heard her laughing in a low, patronizing way, displaying the attitude which white people adopted towards their servants in the colonies. In any case, judging from the way Yabani was grunting, much like an angry pig, he either did not like what the madam was telling him, or he did not understand, though there was no reason why he should not understand, since the madam was speaking pidgin English. Naif could tell that much from the rise and fall of her voice, but he was not near enough to hear what she was saying. She was shuffling in his direction now. He could hear it. Yes, she was coming to him. His heart began to beat fast. He decided to start whistling again, so that the madam would not guess that he was aware of her approach. When he saw her, he pulled himself up straighter, his sagging stomach nicely tucked into his khaki shorts, and yawned his washing with such a flourish one might have believed the whole world belonged to him. Mrs. Mears stood there by the door, not unaware of the show this man was putting on specially for her. She did not speak, but listened to the noisily cheerful and unconcerned way Naif whistled "Abide with Me," as if the tune was one of his native victory songs. Then she decided to put him out of his suspense, otherwise he would burn the whole house down, the way he was swishing the heavy coal iron. Naif. The woman was never able to pronounce his name properly. At first it used to annoy him, but later he shrugged his shoulders. After all, she was not one of his people, and it gave him a kind of secret delight to have proof that the white people, with all their airs, did not know everything. If anyone had pointed out to him that neither did he pronounce the mayor's name properly, that his version sounded like Miester his employers, he would have said, "But I'm only a black man, and I don't expect to know everything." He was one of the Africans who was so used to being told they were stupid in those days, that they started to believe in their own imperfections. "Nafi," drawled Mrs. Mears. She was a comparatively young woman, though the intense heat and sun of the tropics had given her an aged look. Her grey eyes were sunken, and Naif was always uneasy when she talked to him, for not only must he watch her lips to catch what she was saying, he had to watch those eyes right inside her head. It was like watching the eyes of a cat. "Yes, madam," he replied, his head bowed in submission. "We'd go back to England." Naif looked up, rather sharply, stared boldly into her eyes. This was no laughing matter, not a matter to be shy about. What was she talking about? He knew the meaning of her words, yet they did not make sense to him. It was only a few months since she and her husband Dr. Mears had returned from their annual leave. Were they going on leave again? Naif would not be able to afford it, because when the master went on leave, they, the servants, were only paid a month in advance, and if the master decided to stay away for 3 months as most of the colonials did, then they had to fend for themselves. Naif had not recovered from the financial loss incurred during the Mears' last leave. So why were they going again? The madam was still talking, noting the shock on his face. "No be this week, but na week after this one," she added. His heart was beating furiously again. He decided he was going to ask a question, and though he knew it would be regarded as impertinent of him, he would rather that than have to face no ego at home and tell her he did not know why the Mears were going, or for how long they would stay in England. Another leave, he gulped, fear clinging to his throat. No leave. England to fight the Germans. She smiled again, as if that would explain everything. Naif stopped his ironing, putting the still glowing coal iron in its cradle and thinking, well, if that was so, what had it got to do with them? "But why, master?" he persisted. "Why I'm to go England? I'm be no fight man." "Why, madam?" There were many things he wanted to ask, but his knowledge of English was limited, and Mrs. Mears knew and thanked her stars for that, because she did not want to have to answer many questions. Now she was sure that they would be leaving the coast of West Africa. She wanted the servants to remember them with affection. Yet the social distance must be maintained behind the decorum of a meaningless smile. As if as a double reassurance, she repeated with a touch of finality tinged with slight pity, "No be this week, but na week after next. Those them sheets. Don't bother to iron them. Make you and your missus keep them." She did not shuffle back. She walked back briskly, like somebody who, having dreaded an unpleasant task, was grateful that she had finished it. She said nothing to Yabani on her way to their living quarters. When she had disappeared, Yabani and Naif stared at each other. The unspoken question was, what are we going to do? The rain went on falling, as if determined to shed openly the tears which the two men could not shed. Dr. Mears paid them off, and, before he went back to defend his country, he told his bewildered servants that they could stay on in the boys' quarters until a new master came. Naif was given a generous reference. It said he was a devoted servant, that he knew how to bleach sheets white, knew the correct amount of blue to add to a shirt, and that he never overstarched his master's khaki shorts. Naif was assured that the piece of paper would get him a new job. "But, Naif, that paper alone won't employ you, will it?" New Ego asked. "You must have a master first. All I see all over the place are soldiers of different races, some white with round-shaped faces, others with eyes sunk into their heads. Are they to be the new masters? Why are they all here in Lagos? There is a war going on. I have told you before. The new master could be an army man. I only hope he turns up soon, as our money is running out. I had thought Oshia would be going to school, starting after Christmas. Now we have little money to buy even food. Nuigo despaired. Naif started to smile, as if in a dream. He was staring at the wall opposite, not at his wife. So you see, Nuigo, the daughter of Agbardi, that washing the white woman's underclothes was what was able to keep us alive. Only now do you know its value, when even that is taken away from me. Why bring that up? Is it because I mention Oshia's schooling? Every woman is dissatisfied on first arriving in this town, so why taunt me with it? You didn't make a very pretty picture when I came, you know. Naif went on laughing, with that mirthless type of laughter. Nuigo could never tell whether he was in sympathy with her or mocking her. She had stopped trying to understand the man. Sometimes he was clever enough, but often he adopted such a stupid attitude, especially when she brought up some important topic, that it seemed his only way of facing up to a difficult situation. She knew that, if she did not do something about their present condition, Naif would be content to wait hopefully for a new master forever, even though there was absolutely no sign of one ever arriving. Naif, since we are not sure when the new person will be here, can I use part of the money we have left to buy some stocks of cigarettes and matches and start my little business again? She asked. We can't lose, and it will give me something to do. And what of Oshia? Do you want to lose him as you lost Ngozi, while you're looking for money? Who is going to take care of him when you go out to sell your stuff? Listen, Naif. At times I don't know what to make of you. We've heard that too often, so don't say it again. I'm not an ideal husband. I am not like your father. I am not like your former husband. Oh, I know all about that. But, woman, you have to look after your child. That at least is a woman's job. Ngozi was only 4 weeks old when he died in his sleep. Oshia is old enough to let me know his wants. I would prepare his morning meal and yours too before leaving the house. All you'd have to do is keep an eye on him. What if a new master comes tomorrow, eh? When the new master comes, we'll make a plan for that. He hasn't come yet, has he? But Yubani and Cordelia are happy to wait for the new master. They and their 3 children are managing well, Naif challenged. Cordelia is a good woman, but I'm not Cordelia. I don't know how they manage. Anyway, don't forget that Yubani's young relative Dilab is working to help them out. And you never know, Yubani may be looking for another job. I don't think so. How do you know? People don't tell others everything about their lives, do they? I shall start tomorrow morning, Naif. I won't put you to any discomfort, you'll see. Weeks passed and no one came to take Dr. Mear's place. Nuigo had another stall in the market, and some afternoons she would take Oshia with her, though most mornings he remained with his father. Naif did not like this arrangement and grumbled about it, but there was nothing he could do. Not only did life in Lagos rob him of his manhood and of doing difficult work, now it had made him redundant and having to rely on his wife. He would find any excuse to pick a quarrel with Nuigo. One evening when they were in the middle of an argument, there was a knock on the door. "Come in, it's open," Nuigo said in a tired voice. "Oh, it's you, Yubani," said Naif. "You sound as if you don't want me to come in, my friend. Why not take a seat?" Nuigo took her cooking things and left the men to their conversation, glad that Yubani had come at the right time to avert a big row. In the kitchen, which she shared with Cordelia, She noticed that her neighbor seemed to be clearing her things. Nuigo did not want to pry into what she was doing, because there had been so much bickering between the two families lately. The fact that the men were unemployed did not improve matters. However, all of a sudden Cordelia coughed and announced, "Oshia's mother, do you know we are moving away in 2 days?" "What? What are you talking about? Moving where? Aren't you waiting for the new man?" "No, my friend. I've wanted to tell you for days, but you were still cross about the last little tiff we had, and I didn't know how to bring up the subject." "Oh, forget that. We've always squabbled, so it's nothing new. Friends always do," Nuigo said, laughing slowly. "I bet the men pray we quarrel often, since they usually settle our differences with palm wine. My Nafe looks for any opportunity to buy himself some, and Yabani is always a willing guest. But we can't go on living this way. Yabani has got a job with the railways. He'll be working as a cook there." "You are very lucky, Cordelia. Do you know, Nafe still believes that Dr. Mears' praise holds good, even though the man has certainly forgotten all about us, and we don't know if anyone is ever coming to take his place. I think Yabani made his decision quickly, as he knows I am not gifted in trading like you. Nafe knows he can always rely on you. I think that's it." "You think so?" "I think it's that he resents me going out at all." "Oh, that man. I really don't know what I'm going to do about him." "You can't do anything. That's the way he is made. He's one of those people who don't worry about things till they are very imminent." "Him. I wish you luck. You will be living in the railway compound, only a few miles from here." "Yes, it's not far. We shall see each other at the Zabo market, and you will be close enough for me to call on you and let you know when the almighty new master comes," Nuigo said sarcastically. They laughed as they each took the evening meal they had been cooking into their families. Nafe's face was a picture of sadness. It was obvious that Shabani had been telling him of his new job, but Nuigo knew better than to bring up the subject. After the Eubanus left, a few days later, Nafe said, "Do you know, Nuigo, that I could get a good job in the army?" Nuigo hurriedly cleared away the bowls from which they had just finished a meatless meal, which was all she could afford with the little profit she made out of her trading. "Is that so?" she asked. "Have you forgotten that it is a curse and abuse for a respectable woman to sleep with a soldier? Have you forgotten the customs of our people completely?" "Nafe. First you washed a woman's clothes, now you want to join people who kill, rape and disgrace women and children, all in the name of the white man's money." "No, Nafe. I don't want that kind of money. Why don't you start looking for proper work? You don't make any effort. What do you imagine I sit here thinking about day and night? Please don't annoy me. I have taken enough insult from you." Nuigo knew it was time to drop the topic. Nafe was not given to much thinking, and to have arrived at this conclusion about joining the army must have cost him a tremendous effort. It was a consolation to know that he thought about their position at all. They were now the only family living in the compound, a compound in which the grass had grown till it almost swallowed up the servants' quarters. The gardeners and small boys had left one by one, to join the army, to become labourers, or to return to their villages. And still there was no master. That night Nafe and Nuigo clung to each other in sheer desperation, and she seemed to draw strength from this man whom she had never respected. After 5 years of living with him, she was used to him. Listening in the dark to his snores, she coiled inside with shame, remembering some of the evil things she had once thought of Naif. Her new Christian religion taught her to bear her cross with fortitude. If hers was to support her family, she would do so until her husband found a new job. Meanwhile, they had to keep body and soul together somehow. The mere idea of having to move out of this room and pay rent somewhere else sent a cold shiver through her body. She rolled over on their grass-mattressed bed and called softly to Naif. As the early light began to break, "I shall be going to the island this morning. The ship arrived last night and I want to find out if I can get some cartons of cigarettes on the black market from the sailors." Naif was wide awake now, staring at the ceiling of the one-room home. This aspect of his wife's trade was illegal and could land her in trouble if she were caught. But what was he to do? Ask her to stay? What about food for them? He had paid the last of the money from Dr. Mears to a clerk at the docks who was to see if he could get Naif a post as a washerman, or as anything, however menial, on a ship. However, so far the clerk had had no success whatsoever. Naif could not go back to Abuser and admit failure. He was used to living in Lagos, even though it was difficult. There were many of their people there without jobs, and some had been like that for years, so he was not the only one. But this illicit buying of cartons of cigarettes from sailors who had stolen them from their ships. It was impossible for him to make a moral judgment. He could see that there was no way out. It was either that or starvation. "Just be very careful. I don't trust these sailors," he whispered. Their hushed tones were because Oshia loved going to the island with his mother, and if he should guess that she was going to the wharf, there was bound to be a scene. So while he still slept, New Ego made ready to leave, saying, "I shall be back before noon, if all goes well." She went by foot to save money, though she intended to return by bus if she was successful. But at the quayside that morning she was not lucky. In fact, she had almost given up hope of getting what she wanted when she saw the sailor, a gangling young man with a funny walk. She had seen his likes before on previous visits, and knew he could guess what she wanted without their exchanging any words. He beckoned to her to follow him to the cabin below, where he showed her what he had to sell. There were many cartons, but most of them were soaking wet. It would take her a long time to dry them. However, that was better than going home empty-handed, especially as the young sailor was asking only a tenth of the price. New Ego ran with her purchase, her heart thumping with excitement at her luck. By the time she reached the bus stop, she was giddy with joy. She reckoned that the money she would make would feed them for a whole month. She added and subtracted mentally, with the result that by the time she got home her head was swimming, as if she would die. "Welcome, welcome," Oshia shouted as he saw her wading through the overgrown grass to the door. She smiled weakly in return. "Look, Mother, look what we found in the big house. It plays. Look." New Ego looked dazedly at the old guitar that had obviously seen better days. Naif pretended he had not heard her return, and went on making noises on the ancient thing. "Where did you get that from, Naif? You heard your son." There was nothing I could do to amuse him, so we went into the big house to see what we could find. And we found this. We've been busy cleaning it all day. Now I have something to amuse Oshia with. And amuse yourself. I hope it won't stop you looking for a job, Naif the son of Olam, because it is important for you to get one soon. Now, why isn't that a big bundle of cigarettes you're carrying? That will last us some time, will it not? Yes, it will last us for some time, not forever. I am not even well enough to dry them out. I am ill with a child, Naif. So you have to think fast. You always need something to push you into action. Well, here it is. Another child is on the way. What type of car have you got? A. When you were desperate for children, she would not give you any. Now that we cannot afford them, she gives them to you, he exclaimed, his large head lolling to one side. In fact, it seemed to have shrunk in size, since he had cropped his hair closely, to save the cost of haircuts. Well, what do you propose to do? Leave me and go back to your father. You know very well I cannot do that. Do I have to make a song and dance of it? Get up and go look for a job. Go on, get on with it. Do you want me to tell you what I really think? If you don't stop that screaming, I will hit you. Madam would not quote our, Madam has gone to her country. They are never coming back. Get up. Naif lost his temper, and banged the guitar he was holding against her head. Nuigo began to scream abuse at him. You are a lazy, insensitive man. You have no shame. If you hit me again, I shall call the soldiers in the street. Haven't you any shame? Naif made to go for her again, but held back when Oshia started to howl with fear. He turned to look at the frightened child, and in that split second Nuigo lifted the head of the broom and gave Naif a blow on his shoulder. She ran past him, pulling the howling Oshia along. Go and get a job, you. Who is your father, that you can come here and beat me, just because we are far away from anywhere? Naif did not chase her. He sat down on a chair, rubbing his shoulder. If I stay here with this mad woman, I will kill her, he muttered to himself. Going behind their curtained bed, he took out his work clothes, the khaki shorts he had not worn for a long while, the khaki shirt that had been specially made to match, but which he seldom wore as it was so hot. The sick-whipped, he shouted in the direction when Uigo had hidden with Oshia. I'm not coming back until I find a job, and if I don't find a job, I will join the army. So if you don't see me again, then I'm dead. And, believe me, my Kai will never give you, or your God-forsaken father, any peace. I swear. Just go and look for a job, Nuigo shouted back. That is all I ask. Nothing more. Naif had a faint idea of where he was going. As far as he was concerned, his talk about joining the army was just a bluff, which would have paid off if it scared Nuigo a little. He smiled to think of how worried she would be. He had been told there were many European residences at Ikoya on the island of Lagos, and that was where he was headed to see if there was anything there for him to do. He would not even have minded being hired on a daily basis, as long as he could bring something home anyway, until the clerk who had accepted his £5 DASH degrees fulfilled his promise to find him a post. Yabani was fortunate to have got a new job so soon after Dr. Mears left. It was a small consolation to Naif, at least, to be leaving the house, just like any man who tells his wife, I am going to work. He had never had to say that, because his work had been in the same compound as his home. Now he felt like other men, even though he was setting out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when most men would have done the greater part of the day's work. Still he felt better, knowing that the food he left would feed his family in the evening. He was going to make sure that he came back late, too late for any kind of meal. He changed the penny he had in his pocket for 4 farthings, and with one he bought a piece of cola nut which he chewed thoughtfully on the way, like a goat. Walking to Ikoya was tiring. It was almost 10 miles from the part of Yarba he had left. His inquiries at many of the gates yielded him nothing. At first he asked the servants, most of them Ibos like himself, if there were any jobs going in their master's compound. They did not know, and he had the feeling that even if they had known they would not have told him. But he was not going home without definite news for his wife and son. He was now very weary and hungry, and he was sure it was showing in the way he walked. Fortunately he saw a ripe mango, whereas all the ones he had seen previously were green ones. How this one came to be ready to be eaten, and not picked by someone else, before he came on the scene, he did not know. But he was thankful for it. The juice quenched his thirst and its spongy flesh filled him somewhat. He was busy enjoying it just like a schoolboy would, when he saw a group of white men going into Onikan Park to play golf. He followed them at a distance, still sucking the mango. One of the men took notice after a while, looked back, said something to the others, and they laughed. However, Naif was not to be deterred. He was going to talk to them, and no amount of jeering was going to intimidate him. They ignored him for a while, and when they got to Onikan, Naif settled on the cool grass. He needed to rest his tired legs. Unbidden, he started helping them to pick up the balls. Some boys from nearby St. Gregory's School came to do the job, but one look at Naif's bloodshot eyes sent them scurrying like a group of frightened mice, and from a distance they taunted him and called him Grandad the ball picker. The man who had turned round before now came up to Naif and asked, "Is there anything we can do for you? If not, just go and go quickly, before I call the police." The others heard him and guffawed. One of them said, "Fancy threatening someone with the Lagos police, when a pound given to the right person would set you free anyway." They laughed again. No, sir. No police, sir. Now work me to find. I be washerman, sir. Look." Naif showed the reference Dr. Mears had given him to the man, who obviously felt sorry for him. "I knew you were after something, the way you were following us," he remarked in undertones. Not that Naif would have been able to decipher his upper-class English public school accent, though even if he had understood the man, he would not have said anything. "Do beggars ever have any choice? Listen, old boy," the man called to one of his friends. Naif, catching the word boy, thought he was being addressed and replied, "Yes, sir." This amused the man and he laughed, throwing his cap behind his head. "No, not you. Not you at all," he continued laughingly. His friend eventually turned round from one of the swings he was giving the ball, to ask what the fuss was about. Quote, "This man here, judging from this," he shook the piece of paper in the air, "is the best washerman in the country, and listen, old boy, he wants to be employed." "Really? Must we be his employer?" "Why us?" He stood up and gave Naif a searching look. "I don't like the look of him. He's hungry, that's all," replied the first man, who still held Naif's reference. "What? Hungry, with a stomach like that?" "It's palm wine, I think, too much of it," put in the third man, who was lankier than the rest of them. He was approaching his friends, his curiosity much aroused. "He probably has a family, otherwise we could take him with us tomorrow to Fan and Opo." "He," drawled the first man. "That would be a good idea. Let's ask him if he would like to go." "Yes, you do. I can't speak that stuff they call English, that canary English. Pigeon English, old boy, pigeon English." The second man talked to Naif, and it was decided that he should join them at the wharf the following day. He told them that, although he did have a family, His wife and child would be delighted to see him employed again. Yes, he said, he was an Ibo. The Europeans were happy about this, because it had long been an accepted thing that Ibo men made good domestic workers. Naif thanked them profusely, and something in the way he did so told the first man that he had no money and maybe would like to give his family some before leaving for Fana and Opo. He called the others and said, "Look, this man has been retrieving balls all evening. He deserves something, and, by Jove, I think he needs it." They each searched their pockets, and, having made sure they left enough money for drinks at the Island Club on their way home, gave Naif the huge sum of $2, as 4 shillings were then called. Naif's heart was singing. He quickly disappeared, and could even afford to go home by bus. On reaching the local market, he bought a small bag of rice, a large tin of herrings and some fruit, costing him less than a shilling altogether. At home, Nuigo was now so ill that all Oshia had had to eat was a little gari left over from their afternoon meal. She was relieved to know that Naif was back, but how was she going to cope if he went away on the morrow? Eventually they agreed that it was better than his staying here, eating up the little reserves they had. At least, Naif added, "I'll be taking my stomach away with me, and you won't have to worry about buying soap to wash my clothes." "You're taking away the help you can give as well," Nuigo said in a tired voice. To Naif, this was something new, almost vernacular. So he was of help to Nuigo. These last days he had felt he was more like a stone tied round her neck. He never knew that she needed him. Not that this had worried him unduly, for after all he was a man, and if a woman cared for him, very good. If not, there would always be another who would care. Yet it was so convenient, so tidy, if the woman who cared for a man happened to be either his mother or his wife. He felt sorry for Nui going away. She had so far had a rotten deal, but judging from how close to Oshia she was sitting, Naif knew that, if there was a choice between him and Oshia, the mother would jump for her son. Still, he was leaving them 4 shillings. By the time they had finished spending that, he hoped she would have recovered enough to sell the cigarettes she had bought for almost next to nothing. They ate well that night, even though Nuigo did not feel like joining in much. Naif made a large soup that would last them for days, as long as she could get up and have it heated regularly. He made her promise to look after herself, and to visit the other abuser people on the island, and the few living in Yaba. Tentatively, Nuigo asked when he would be coming back, but Naif did not know. All he knew was that he was being employed. Ree was happy that he did not have to negotiate for wages. He was confident he would be paid, because he liked the men, and they looked like people from good stock. There was something about them, especially the one who had first approached him, that made him trust them completely, and prefer them to Dr. Mears. These men looked you straight in the eye, and did not avoid your stare. That to Naif was proof that they would find it very dishonorable to lie, so he was sure he would be paid adequately, that they would not cheat him. Nuigo worried all night, at the same time trying to hide her anxiety over him, and though she could hardly sleep most of the night, ironically, as soon as the first cocks in the compound started to announce the beginning of another day, she fell into a troubled sleep. The sun cut itself through the little opening in their window, and across their bed. Its early heat fell on her face, and she opened her eyes gradually, wondering where she was, and why she was not out selling her morning wares. She reminded herself that Naif had gone to work, but it took her a few minutes to realize that he had not just gone to wash clothes in the compound, that he had gone to Fun and Opo. Where was this town with such a strange name? The name had a kind of music in it, but how strange it sounded. Please, Fun and Opo, treat him well, she prayed. Nuigo was in her kitchen heating some beans one evening when Oshia dashed in, his eyes as round as saucers. Mother, mother, there are sodders in the compound. They have big lorries. Soldiers. I knew it would happen one day, now that Naif is not here and Yabani lives far away. I wonder what they want. She was going to peep through the kitchen window when a short European barged in through the open door. There were two big fierce-looking dogs in his wake barking furiously at Toshia, who ran and hid himself behind his mother. Nuigo begged the man in her halting pidgin English to please stop the dog from frightening her Pekin. The man got the message and barked just like the dogs. Sit and behave yourselves. This surprised mother and child so much that for a while they were lost in admiration for this man who could make such fierce-looking dogs obey him. Then he barked at Nuigo, "Your husband, the child's father, Nuigo did not understand him, and she started to talk in her own language. The man looked out and called to another person in the compound. This one was black, but also in army uniform, and he acted as interpreter, speaking to Nuigo in a strange kind of Ibibio dialect. It was made clear to her that the senior members of the British Army stationed in that part of Lagos needed houses like this one. She must pack her things and move. When her husband turned up they would tell him where she was if she would leave her address. All this was said in a very loud voice, as if Nuigo and Oshia were completely deaf. She shook with fear and anger, while Oshia tugged at her lapper, as if he would pull it off her. They soon marched away, their horrible dogs with them. They have gone now, Oshia. Leave my lapper alone. We must move from here, and God help us. It's our house, Mother. Father won't be able to find us when he comes back. Are we going to live like the horse beggars in the streets? No, we will not live like horse beggars. We'll look for a place to stay, and if we can't find a place, then we'll live with our friends until your father returns. Staying another night in her present place did not appeal to her at all. Not with men who'd bark like that. Only God knew what they could do to a woman. And those snarling dogs, no, she would not sleep another night there. Khan's advertising rooms to let, apply within were so rampant at the time, that even Nuigo, who could neither read nor write, could recognize them for what they were. She found a small room in Little Road, where the rent was 4 shillings a month, and had to be paid in advance. The Yoruba landlord asked where her husband was because he did not cherish the idea of having in his house a single Igbo woman who might turn out to keep the company of bad Igbo men. Nuigo was then forced to tell the story of her misfortune, and though the man did not trust any Igbo person, he believed Nuigo, for there had been similar cases where he worked in the Nigerian railway department. Many junior messengers had lost their jobs because the masters they were serving returned to Britain to join up. Nuigo left Oshia with the other tenants in the new compound and dashed down to the railway yard to enlist the help of Cordelia. Yabani was still working, so he could not come with them, but he advised, "Nuigo, be very careful. You know your condition." "Thank you. I'll be so happy when I have moved from that house. It's not the same. It has all changed, and those army men were the last straw." The two women dashed out into the evening to start shifting the few pieces of furniture that adorned the room. when Uigo and Naif had lived for over 5 years. After they had made 3 trips, Yabani was free to join them. He helped them lift the heavy things. The 3 of them moved the bed, chairs, cooking pots and mattress. Last of all they brought the squawking hens and their newly laid eggs. Uigo boiled some of these, and she and her friends ate them as they relaxed in front of the veranda of her new home, ruminating about their past life in Dr. Mears' compound. "It will be nice to live among people again," Uigo remarked to her friends. "I know what you mean," said Cordelia. "Life can be pretty lonely in white men's compounds. No one talks to you, and you must not make noise. It is not so bad for us now, because the cooks and stewards in the railway compound live together. I am surrounded by people, almost like abuser." "You and your abusers," Yabani laughed. "You can never duplicate such a life here. But your new neighbors look very friendly. They are not Yorubas, see? The landlord is a Yoruba man, but all the tenants are from other parts of the country. Then you will not be lonely. The Yorubas are nice too, it's just that I don't think they think well of us Ibos. Especially if you don't understand their language," Cordelia said. "I know." As the days passed, it became clear that she was going to have her next baby without the help of Naif. His ship had been laid. Ato, whose husband Nwakasa was in another ship, had told her during the last abuser meeting, that rumor had it, that the Japanese and the Germans were fighting the British, and that because of this Naif, and many others working on ships, could not come home. "But, Ato, on whose side are we? Are we for the Germans or the Japanese or the other one, the British?" "I think we are on the side of the British. They own Nigeria, you know. And abuser too." Uigo asked, not believing a word. "I don't know about that," Ato confessed. She was at home nursing her now extended stomach inside her one-room apartment when Oshia burst in, crying with sheer anger and frustration. The boy felt humiliated. The tarpaulin shirt she had bought for him months previously was torn on both sides, revealing his large belly above rather thin legs. All Oshia seemed to have now, she thought as she watched him banging his head against the door, were head and this unhealthy-looking stomach. What was she to do? The child was being fed regularly, though if one had told her that Gary in the morning, Gary in the afternoon and Gary in the evening all days of the week was not proper nutrition for a growing child, she would have felt very hurt. She knew no other way to feed a child, and the sad thing was that Oshia was lucky to get even enough Gary to fill his belly. Uigo knew that someone had annoyed her son. She could only watch him work out his emotion in this way. She could not go out to see who had so angered Oshia. Apart from the fact that she was too tired, she had washed the only decent outfit she possessed, and now had to sit indoors, on their only chair, to wait for it to dry. Her other outfit was too gaudy for everyday wear. She kept it in case the time came when she had to sell it to the Fulani wanderers who came knocking at people's doors asking for old things to buy. "What is the matter?" she asked at last, when she saw that Oshia's temper was not so violent. "Come, son, and tell your mother." "Tell." He did not go to her, but he lifted his tear-stained eyes, rubbed some of the wetness away, unknowingly making a greater mess of the already dirty face. Perspiration ran down both sides of his head, forming two more snake-like lines, to add to those made by the tears. "They asked me to go away," he blurted out. "Who asked you to go away?" "Them." He pointed towards the door. "They wouldn't let me eat of their Sarah." "You mean the landlord's people?" I thought their little boy Falarancho was your friend. He isn't my friend anymore. They told me to go away. Well, Oshia, you can't force people to invite you to their Sarah. But she sighed, knowing that Sarahs were unofficial parties, where food was free for all, especially children. They were usually given by women who wanted babies, who were invariably told by the native doctors that the only way they would conceive was if they fed other children. Nuigo could see in her mind's eye what must have happened. The other children would have been in smart clothes with neat haircuts, looking very healthy and clean. Her Oshia looked like a tramp compared with them. It would have cost her good money which she could not spare to wash his dark ball in. She imagined his mouth watering at the sight of the heaps of boiling rice, akara, goat's meat. She imagined him sitting down in anticipation with the other children. I was about to dip my hands into the rice when Falarancho's mother came and pulled me up. She said I should get up. I hate the Yorubas. She said I wasn't invited. Maybe there was a mistake, Nuigo said, and she knew that Oshia was watching her closely. She brightened up for her sake. Don't worry, son. When we have money you'll go to school like the other children. All abuser people in this town send their boys to school. Why should you be the exception? Do you know that you're the most handsome of them all? You have the look of an Arab or a Fulani, and those horrid people can't take that away from you. When we get enough money and dress you up nicely, you'll see what I'm saying. Remember, son, that you are a very handsome boy. Oshia stopped crying and listened attentively to his mother's voice. Her reassuring words made an impression on him that remained during the long wait for Naif to return from Fan and Opo. For if his mother said he was handsome, Oshia thought, and then it must be true.